Hello and welcome to this webinar on the expanded Sustainable Farming Incentive offer in 2024, delivered by the Farming Advice Service on behalf of DEFRA and in partnership with the Farming Forum. I'm Laura Harpham, I'm Programme Manager for the Farming Advice Service, and I'll be hosting today. I'm joined by DEFRA Farming and Countryside Director Janet Hughes and the Policy Lead working on Sustainable Farming Incentive, Tom Coles. This webinar is in collaboration with DEFRA, the RPA, Catchment Sensitive Farming and the Farming Forum, and we have a team of colleagues available to answer questions as we go, so hopefully we'll be able to tackle quite a lot of things that people want to hear about. They'll be answering as we go, and I'll let you know how that will work in a moment, but we'll also have a live Q&A with Janet and Tom and anybody else we need to call on after the initial update on the situation with SFI applications and agreements. Since our last webinar on this topic back in January, we've had an announcement of more than 100 actions for the new SFI scheme offer, as well as a general election, a new government, and everything that entails. As you will have hopefully seen, the new government has committed to maintaining consistency through ELMS, and the SFI application rollout is progressing as planned, though there is one remaining unknown, which is the outcome of the budget at the end of October. Janet will speak on all of those things in a little bit more detail shortly. So without further ado, I will hand over to Janet, if I may, to kick things off. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Laura, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for dialing in. It's lovely to have you all here. I'm Janet. I'm the director in DEFRA that's responsible for the Farming and Countryside programme, and I'm delighted to be here with some of my colleagues. And we're really looking forward to hearing your questions today and answering them as best we can. Today's not your only chance. There's lots of different ways to get in touch with us, and some of the contact details have just been posted in the chat if you do want to follow up either about your individual situation or questions that you don't get the answer to today. We will do our best to understand where you're coming from with the questions and answer them as well as we can. If we get the wrong end of the stick, then I'm very sorry, we're not doing that on purpose, but do please follow up, either put another question on Slido or follow up afterwards, and we will do our best to help. Tom's going to talk you through the SFI offer, so if you already know that, you can spend your time perusing the questions on Slido and voting for the ones that you think are the most important for us to answer today, and he's going to explain what's on offer there. We really welcome your questions. The only thing I want to say by way of introduction is that the new government, as Laura has said, are committed to continuing to roll out these schemes, and SFI is open for applications now for everybody. Higher tier information will be coming soon, and then it will be opened next year, and we'll get into that no doubt in the questions and answers. So we are full steam ahead with rolling out these schemes, and Tom is going to give you an insight into what is on offer. Tom, over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello everyone, I'm Tom Coles. I work for Janet on SFI policy along with quite a few other people on the panel today. So my SFI, you'll remember, started off I think in 2021 with the SFI pilot, and then the proper scheme launched in 2022, and then there was SFI 23 last year, and now we just opened fairly recently the expanded offer for 2024. Next slide, please. This scheme SFI is about contributing to food, farming, carbon, water, biodiversity. It's very much designed to work for farmers. We've had a really encouraging positive rating back. You see that 81%. We've now got over 25,000 farmers in SFI agreements, which means if you look at agri-environment schemes across the board, we've got about half of farmers now in schemes. We'll continue to roll out schemes, and we're open for applications. Next slide, please. This slide's about delivering outcomes, so that's what it's all about, really. We're starting to make a really big difference out there with your help. There are some good stats there. 713,000 hectares of arable land now farmed without insecticides, 22,000 hectares of low input grassland managed sustainably, nearly 64,000 kilometres of hedgerows now under management, and that will rise as the scheme grows. Next slide, please. So on the 21st of May this year, we published most of the details of the scheme. That included 101 SFI actions. There's scheme information and terms and conditions. And if you want to find it on gov.uk, it's got the search word there, expanded SFI offer, and you'll find it. Next slide, please. Then in August this year, we published a few updates to those documents, which includes slightly updated terms and conditions, slightly updated versions of the 101 actions, kind of in response to feedback we got from farmers and others after we published the first batch. We published one endorsed action, I'll come on to what that's about, on managing species-rich grassland, which makes now we've got 102 actions out there. We also published voluntary advice on the actions, which sits on the website right underneath each action. And we published slightly updated scheme information about things like how the endorsed and supplemental actions work. Next slide, please. So this round of SFI keeps all the main features that we had in SFI 23 really. So we got rolling applications that can be made at any time of year, universal access for farmers and various others, quite a lot of flexibility in the scheme around how you choose your actions, combinations of actions, simpler processes to allow more talented land to come into SFI. Much faster entry into agreements than was the case under previous schemes like countryside stewardship, quarterly payments, and then extra payments, the SFI management payment and the common land additional payment, which I'll come on to in a bit more detail on a slide down the way a bit. Next slide, please. So eligibility for the offer. One of the big changes we made this year was to take away the previous requirement that only people eligible for BPS could come into SFI. And what that does basically is it makes it much easier for new entrant farmers to come in, but also small holders and non-farmer land managers such as some foresters. The other main eligibility rules are that applicants have got to have management control, basically meaning that you've got to be actually be in a position to deliver the actions we're paying for. And those of you familiar with SFI will know that we've changed the rules for tenants, particularly short-term tenants, compared to countryside stewardship to make it much easier for them to come in. So that's partly because most of the actions are now 3-year actions rather than 5-year actions. But we've eased in SFI 22, and ever since then, we've made it much easier for you to demonstrate management control, even if you're on short one-term, one-year rolling tenancies. Right. The other main eligibility thing, land must be in England, and land's got to be eligible for the actions, and each of the actions says what land is eligible for it. Next slide, please. So now looking at the whole offer, we've got 102 actions. That includes all of the actions that used to be in the SFI 23 offer. There are 23 kind of like brand new actions around agroforestry, no-till farming, precision farming, and cover crops. And then 57 of the actions were previously in countryside stewardship, but have been updated, kind of turned into SFI style and brought into the SFI. And then we're planning to add more actions, which we hope to publish this winter, including more endorsed actions. So the offer will grow again soon. Next slide, please. So this slide just gives a kind of feel of the type of features and land that are covered by the actions. I won't go through them all, but basically there's a broad spread of different types of actions for all different types of farmers in the country. And then the next slide, please, is just pulling out specifically for upland farmers. We've got a lot more actions available in SFI this year for the uplands. There's a difference, of course, below the moorland line and above the moorland line. So below the moorland line, kind of in theory, you're eligible for the full range of SFI actions, although in practice, of course, you've got to be eligible for the actions in question, which often kind of limits it a bit. And then we've got new actions there to help manage rough grazing, scrub, dry stone walls, ditches, ponds, native breeds, traditional farm buildings, and things like that. And then for people above the moorland line, a few of the general actions are available, like hedgerows, dry stone walls, ponds, native breeds, traditional farm buildings. And then there's a new range of specialist actions around moorland grazing, cattle and ponies, shepherding, removal of livestock, and native breeds. So yes, basically that part of the offer is really expanded quite a lot this year. Next slide, please. So there are various different types of SFI actions in the offer. Nearly all of the actions at the moment, 101 of them, are so-called unendorsed. That means that they're kind of like off-the-shelf actions that are really quite fast to apply for in the sort of standard SFI style. Then we've introduced endorsed actions, which were also in countryside stewardship previously. Those are actions which only work in sort of certain places, and they just need someone to check that the place that they're being done in is the right place before they can be added into an agreement. Then we've got limited area actions. This is the rule that came in, I think, last March, where certain actions, we've got a slide on this next, I think, can only be done cumulatively on 25% of your farm's land area. Then there's rotational actions, static actions. So some actions have got to be done in the same place for the duration of that action, and some of them can be shifted around with farming rotations. And then supplemental actions have come in this year. Again, they used to be in countryside stewardship. Those are actions that can only be done if you're doing a base action, so that might a top-up action. Next slide, please. So this one just lists the 10 actions that are subject to the 25 limited area rule. I won't go through them all, but those are the ones, and they're basically all actions which only really make sense if they're done on smaller areas, not on very large areas. Next slide, please. Yeah, and as I mentioned before, we got the SFI management payment, so that is basically available to all of our applicants. It pays £40 per hectare per year up to the first 50 hectares of land. So it's £40 for the first agreement year, then it goes to £20, and it's paid up to the first 50 hectares. So it's a maximum of, I think, 2,000 the first year and 1,000 per year thereafter. And the additional common land payment is paid for group applications on commons at a rate of £7 per hectare per year. Next slide, please. Getting paid under SFI, so it's an annual payment paid in quarterly instalments. Different to countryside stewardship and previous schemes, the first payment's usually made in the 4th month after your agreement begins. So it starts, then kind of just after 3 months later, basically you get your first payment, then you're paid quarterly after that, up to the final payment in that year. And one of the other big differences about SFI is that you don't have to submit an annual revenue claim. Instead, you sort of might do a relatively tick box confirmation at the end of each year that you've done what you said you were going to do, and that then frees up the 4th payment, and then you can sort of carry on for the next year's payments. Next slide, please. Applying for an SFI agreement. So SFI applications are online. To start with, in the expanded offer, like we did for previous offers, the RPA has opened up applications in a controlled way. So for the time being, farmers complete a short expression of interest, send that in, and then RPA, when the time is right, will then invite them to apply. That will change in time and open up, and we'll confirm next steps on that fairly soon. Next slide, please. I think it's the last one. Finally, you can have land in SFI, which is also in other schemes like countryside stewardship. The rules for that is that obviously you've got to be eligible for both of the options you're doing in the schemes. The activities you're doing have got to be compatible with each other and not undermine each other, and you won't be paid twice for doing the same or a similar thing. And I think that brings us to the end of the slides. So I think back to you, Laura, I guess.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's useful to have an outline and a bit of a review. You can see that the team in the background have very kindly been posting links to the various things, because there's some information on those slides that people might have been looking to jot down. So the DEFRA Farming blog team have been putting out information on this, well, from when the announcements were made. Obviously, there was a little bit of a hiatus on comms around anything government related over the summer. But now all of this information is online with the guidance in terms of how to make an application, and also what the rules and requirements, and of course environmental benefits and payment levels for the various options are. So you can see all of those in the chat. Conscious that we have lots of questions to get through, but Janet, I'm not sure if there was anything further, either in terms of picking up individual aspects of Tom's section, or nope, we want to get straight back into it.
Keen to get into Q&A and make sure there's plenty of time for that. I don't want anybody to feel like we're kind of filling up too much time presenting. I do think it's important to give everybody the same information in case it's the first time you're looking at it and you haven't had a chance to look at all the documentation. But I'm keen to get into questions.
Okay, brilliant.
So I'm going to do as many as possible while we're here for everybody.
Definitely. So I can see that people have been interacting with the slide as we've been going along, which is great. So essentially we're going to work from the top, because those are being voted as the most popular. Jenna, I know that you'll be able to answer some, but then you might also be bringing some of the, I think we're 20 strong team that we've got working in the background from the various different specialisms to help out with those. So
yeah. We've got RPA, we've got Natural England, we've got DEFRA Policy Team, we've got various other folks. So if anything, just to try and make sure we can answer as many as possible while we're here. So yeah, let's crack on.
All right, number one, nice and simple. How do I transfer from HLS to SFI?
This is such a massive question and really important, we know, to those who are still in HLS and wanting to move. You can move from HLS into SFI. If your HLS agreement is expiring, then you can apply for SFI to start when your HLS agreement finishes. If you're wanting to leave your HLS agreement before it expires, you can choose to leave on an anniversary, in which case you get paid up to that anniversary. Or you can choose to leave during a year. If you do that, you'll only get paid up to the end of the previous year, because we don't do sort of here's 23 days worth of payments, or whatever, 3 months and 3 days worth of payments. So that's up to you. The process, if you're doing what I've just said, secondly, before your agreement expires, for moving from HLS into SFI, is currently quite heavily bureaucratic and takes a while. You can do it, and if you really want to do it, contact the RPA and they will be able to advise you how. Or if you've got an HLS agreement, you've most likely got a Natural England advisor that you can contact to talk to them about your options. What we're looking to do is to make that process much smoother and more straightforward for you by making it possible for you to do it yourself online at a time of your choosing. That's not ready yet. We'll be delivering that as we get into next year. So if you really want to move now, contact RPA, but that's going to be more bureaucratic and difficult than it will be later once we've built that more automated way to do it.
And sorry, it's not written down, but it's just reminded from a conversation that we had back in January, I think. Am I remembering it correctly or incorrectly, that if you're transferring from HLS to SFI, the environmental benefits of your new SFI agreement have to at least match? No, that's not true.
No, so that's what we'd like to happen. We don't really want people to do less than they're currently doing, but most people will be moving because they want to get more money and do more stuff, and we don't want to put unnecessary bureaucracy in the way. And we did start out with that being a rule, and we just found it was ridiculously complicated to implement and not delivering enough value to be worth the candle for anybody. So in our general quest to make this just less hassle and easier for everyone, you can move and do whatever you want in the new schemes, and there's no penalty for leaving your old scheme. So there's no particular requirement there, and that's just on the basis that we know that most people, if they're moving, then it's likely to be to do more stuff or get more money, and if it isn't, then that's your choice, and you should be allowed to make choices.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you for that. Right, and that's been cleared out. So thank you very much, Becky, I think, and the team in the background. Next one, I have submitted many SFI, so I think this is from an advisor rather than a farmer, unless they run lots of businesses.
Could be a farmer, yeah.
Many SFI 2024 applications for farms, including one for our own farm. There we go. They're not being processed. What are you waiting for the October budget? And I suppose proviso is, if not, are there other things that are causing delays?
Yeah, no, so I can see why people will be putting those two things together, because the October budget is going to be the moment where we can clarify how much money is available for all of these schemes over the next year, and until then we can't confirm that because the decision hasn't been made. So the first thing to say is, if you've seen speculation about that, nobody knows the answer to that question because it hasn't been decided yet in terms of what the budget is for next year. But the Secretary of State has been saying very clearly and publicly, that the new government are committed to rolling out these schemes and carrying on making them available, and they have continued making SFI available since they were elected on that basis, and B, that he is fighting the corner of farmers and the sector and the environment to get these, and the food production, to get the budget agreed that is needed. So that's the thing to say on the budget, but we don't know the answer to what's going to happen in the spending review in terms of exactly how much will be allocated until the end of November. We're not waiting for that to issue SFI agreements. I can see why you might put those two and two together to get that answer, but that's not what we're doing. What we've done with SFI is we've merged CX mid-tier into SFI. So SFI had 23 actions in it. It's now got 102 because we've merged all the things that are in it now from CS mid-tier, and we've added new actions. That is a big deal in terms of delivery. When we deliver new and expanded offers in this way, what we do is we go slowly at first, checking every single agreement in detail to make sure that it's all working as it should. Everybody's getting the service that they need. Everything's happening as expected. And we always find adjustments that we need to make when we do that, because every farm is different and every combination of actions is different. And we make adjustments to the system. And therefore, while we're doing those checks, it takes longer. So we've had, just to give you the numbers behind that, we've had about nearly 12,000 expressions of interest to come into SFI. Almost all of those have been invited. So there's about 400 that haven't yet been invited, but the turnaround is pretty rapid now. So everyone's getting invited who wants to come in. We've had about 3,000 applications so far, and we've so far got about 700 live agreements. What we're nearly ready now to A, stop asking you to do an expression of interest, and then B, start standing down those extra checks, which we'll be doing over the next few weeks. And we'll do that as quickly as we can. But we do really want, the most important thing is to make sure that everybody's got the right level of service. I'm well aware, however, that people have been used to SFI agreements being turned around very quickly in SFI 23, and we all want to get back to that as quickly as we can. But we do need to make sure that everything's working as it should for everybody and you're all getting the right service. So over the next few weeks, we'll be standing down those additional checks and you'll see things speeding up again. RPA colleagues have been putting more resources into doing these checks so we can turn around agreements more quickly, because we know that people want to get cracking on with it. But it is absolutely not because of the budget, it's because we're doing the delivery in the way we always do with the controlled rollout to begin with. And I'm sorry if you've been kept waiting. If you are worried about your individual case, however, and you've been waiting a while and you don't know what's going on, do please contact RPA colleagues and to find out what's going on using the contact details that we put in the chat earlier.
Brilliant. Okay, yeah. And if there's information pending which is slowing things down, the RPA will be asking people for that extra information.
Yes, they will. But if you're worried about it at all, do get in touch, and then your individual case can be looked at. So I've just given the general answer, but if there's an individual issue, then please do follow it up.
Great, thank you. Ooh, okay. So this is a question about why possibly can't you implement a system where we can choose a start date for SFI agreements to get continuity of schemes. So in this instance, currently we have to wait for one scheme to end, as the computer system blocks areas that have a current option, and there is nowhere to state we want a start date in the future.
Yeah, it's a really good shout, and we do want to do that. we would really like to be able to allow you to choose a start date, and indeed an end date is another thing people often ask that's related to this, which is why the minimum agreement is 3 years. Why can't I do one for 5 or 10 if I really want to? And we would really like to be able to give you that flexibility. So that's one of the things we're looking at as we continue to develop the service over the next year or two. The current set of priorities on the service are to get the SFI 2024 offer running without any of those extra checks that I just mentioned at the pace and scale that we know everybody would like to see, and we will do that as quickly as we possibly can, and to get the higher tier offer out and running for everybody. And we'll publish details of that later this year. I might as well cover that now because there is a question on it later. We were due to publish information about the higher tier offer over the summer. We have not done that because we were not quite ready, and I'm sorry about that, but also because we've had an election and a spend review. We will publish all those full details before the end of this year, most likely in the next couple of months, and then we'll open it next year, and we will provide more information about the timings for that shortly. And those are the two big priorities at the moment. Once we've got those two things done, we'll go on to these sorts of service improvements for the future.
Great, and thank you for preempting that, because I also expected that question to come up. I haven't seen it on the list yet, but I'm sure it will, so I appreciate you covering it. Okay, next one, which again, very popular. How do I upgrade existing SFI actions, or CS options rather, to new SFI actions? And they've given an example, which I'm afraid I don't know the codes off by heart, but for example, GS2 or LIG1 to GRH6.
So these are the grassland options where you might be doing one of the actions that was available previously, like low input grassland, and you want to go up to species rich grassland. If you want to do any changes like that, the thing to do is contact RPA colleagues through the change of circumstances process. And I don't know if anybody wants to come on and say anything more about that, but if you've got anything like that you want to do, that's what you should do, is contact colleagues at RPA, and there is a change of circumstances process. What we want to be able to do is make it possible for you to do that in an automated way, and make it possible for you to have a single agreement, because one of the bits of feedback we get from people a lot is having multiple agreements is not very helpful. I mean, it's difficult to manage. Sometimes people do want more than one agreement. So sometimes maybe the landlord's got an agreement to do some things on one bit of the farm, and the tenant's got an agreement to do some other things on a different bit of the farm. But a lot of people would rather have one agreement that they can change themselves and they can upgrade and add things, and that's exactly where we want to get to. But that is something that we will get to once we've delivered this expanded offer. We will then look to those sorts of improvements to make everything slicker and more straightforward. So we've taken big steps forward in combining mid-tier into SFI, and those on the farming forum might know that was something that people on the farming forum were saying we should do, and you're right, and we have now done that. But there's a long way to go to make this as slick and simple as we want it to be for everybody, and we are going as fast as we can and doing that as hard as we can, and that is one of the ways we want to do that over the next year or two. So you will keep seeing improvements in these areas over the next year or two. Meanwhile, if you want to do anything like that, contact RPA colleagues.
And we'll keep working down the questions with you, Janet, if that's all right. But if one of our RPA colleagues in the background could put something in the chat in relation to the change of circumstance process, if that's something that people are looking to explore, then it'd be useful to have links through to online guidance or some tips on how the process works. Thank you. Right, the big one. I don't expect you to be able to give a date, but I'll ask the question: when will the SFI 2024 open for all people?
Well, I'm really glad you've asked this question, because it is open for all people now. So we've got an expression of interest process in place at the moment. And the reason we do that is because when we're first rolling out an expanded offer, we want to know who wants to apply, so that as we're doing this controlled process that I mentioned, where we're keeping a really close eye on everything, we like to be able to see who we're inviting and invite people in a way that's going to work for them. We're now just inviting people who want to come in, and we don't really need that process. So we're just nearly at the point where we can stand down that process, but it doesn't actually stop you getting in. It just means you need to tell the RPA that you want to apply, and then they'll invite you. So it is open to everybody now. The one set of folk who need to contact RPA if you want to apply, and it isn't as straightforward, is for commons and those farming on commons, where you do need to contact RPA, and that's a different sort of process for you to get into SFI. We will over time make that more automated as well, but that, as anybody who's farming on commons will know, is much more complicated. It involves different maps, all those sorts of things, and that does tend to come once you've got the rest of the service in place. So if you're farming on a common, contact RPA, and they'll advise you what to do and support you. But for everybody else, it is open for everybody now. You just need to express your interest, and you'll get invited, and then you can come in and apply. And I saw a question earlier down that somebody said they had expressed an interest and they hadn't had an invitation yet. So if you're waiting and you haven't had it, then do get back in touch with RPA to find out what's going on with that, because for the vast majority of people, invitations are being issued fairly quickly as they come in.
And to follow up to that, I'm not sure it's yourself or another member of the team. When you submit your application, if you go through the online application system, and then presumably you receive a notification, yes, your application, or rather your expression of interest, has been received and is being processed. So it is possible to get confirmation that you've done everything you need to do in order to express your interest.
Yeah, I believe so, but I don't know whether Tom Foster or India would like to come in from RPA to just confirm exactly what happens there. Go ahead, India.
Hi everyone, so I'm working in the RPA and development of the SFI scheme. Yes, that's correct. As soon as you submit your expression of interest, you will get an automated thank you for expressing your interest. We've got that, and then you'll also get an automated email from us. So, but like Janet said, if anyone's concerned that they've not had that or they've not been invited in, please just contact RPA and we can definitely get you an invitation out to apply.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Cindy. I appreciate it. The system works. Good. Okay. Right. Next one. Oh, in fact, maybe we've already answered this. Do I have to wait until the 1st of Jan to apply? Or can I apply in December for the 1st of Jan start date?
You can apply in December, start in January. One thing that people have said to us is that they'd like a longer lead-in period, and that is one thing we'll look at as we carry on improving the service. But for now, that's the way it works for now.
Oh, okay. So if I wanted to apply in December but not start until March for some reason, at the moment, can I say that as part of my application?
No, you can't.
Just wait until Feb?
You just wait to accept your agreement. So the way it works is you apply, you'll be then offered an agreement, and the pace at which we do that will speed up again over the next few weeks and months, as it did last year with SFI 2023. If you don't want to start yet, what you do is don't accept your agreement yet, because once you accept your agreement, it will start on the 1st of the following month. So that's a bit messy, and that means you've got to remember, but you can control it in that way if you want to. Over time, what we would love to be able to allow you to apply whenever you want, and then say, actually, I want to start on this date. And then in related news, lots of people have said they don't really much like having lots of different agreements, and that's a pain. Some people like it, other people don't want that and want to be able to harmonize everything so it all just runs to the same cycle. And that's something we're again looking at as part of continuing to improve the service over the next year or two, to allow you to just have a single agreement if that's what you want, with a single set of dates attached to it. That sounds very simple, but it's actually really complicated to deliver if you've already got some agreements to then transfer them across, but not too complicated to do, and we will get there.
And follow-up question to the first point, how long does an offer of an agreement stay open if you do want to wait for whatever reason to accept? Oh,
that's a good question. And we've previously had limits on that. I don't think we do at the moment. India, does anybody else want to come in and answer that question?
Yeah, I can come on that. So as we said, we're still in a controlled rollout. So at the moment, your agreement offer will stay there until you accept it. If we do put any more controls on that in the future, when we can come out of the controlled rollout, we'll definitely make sure that we do publicise that and give people notice for that.
Thank you. Okay, good. Just thinking if people are running up to Christmas and then planning their activities for the beginning of the year, they might be making a note of all of these dates to think about.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I'm not sure if this is one for yourself or Tom or another colleague, but I know Tom did mention it. When will the other endorsed options be available?
So for anybody who's not familiar with these, so we've got, as Tom mentioned, we've got one endorsed action that's available now, which is species-rich grassland. And if you want to do that, all you need to do is say that you want to do the option, and then we've got a good process in place with lots of people standing at the ready to do the endorsement. In fact, I was speaking to somebody today who'd already had an endorsed action approved to get on with. So that one's available already. There are more to come. We'll publish the full details of those later in the year, and then we'll make them available into next year, and we'll confirm the timescales of that as soon as we possibly can towards the end of this year when we put the information out. That comes alongside the higher tier information, basically. So we're expecting that to be out November or December at the latest, and then we'll be making those available to apply for in the new year, and we'll confirm the timescales for that when we publish that information. So if you're wanting to do lots of other stuff plus some endorsed actions, it's worth you considering putting in an application now for everything else that you want to do, and then adding on the endorsed action later, because you will need to go through that endorsement process as well. Shouldn't be too time consuming, but it will take a bit of time, and they're not all available just yet. So you can do that if you want to do that, rather than waiting for your whole agreement, and just add the endorsed actions later.
And for those who aren't familiar, and for my own clarification, to be fair, endorsed actions are where something needs to be confirmed, essentially. So it's a habitat that someone needs to come out and confirm, yes, this is a habitat that exists on your farm, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make as much as possible of what we've got to offer available to as many people as possible, as straightforwardly as possible. So these are actions where there needs to be some level of confirmation that either the location is appropriate for the action. So for example, for species rich grassland, we want to check that there is some possibility of having species rich grassland on that site. Either it's already there or there's the potential for it, or that the way you're going to implement the option is appropriate for the particular setting. But what we're trying to do is some of those actions wouldn't have been available in mid-tier. They would have only been available in higher tier. So creating or restoring species rich grassland, for example, you could only do if you had a higher tier agreement. And we want those actions to be much more widely available. So we've put them into SFI, but with this endorsement process so that you can do them in SFI. You don't have to have a fully bespoke higher tier agreement. You can do them in SFI, but there is this bit of extra process where we have to confirm that they are definitely being done in the right place in the right way. And there is a contract in place to make sure there's enough advisors and a decent process to make that happen quickly. And we are keeping a close eye on that to see how it's working. And we were just this morning actually discussing with some of the stakeholder organisations that we should put some more information out about how that's going and how long it's taking so people can see, because I think that there's a worry that that's going to take forever and it's going to be awful. And we've learned a lot from previous schemes about how this sort of process works. And so we're looking to make that as slick and straightforward for everybody as possible. So we'll publish some more information on our blog about how that's going as soon as we've got some useful kind of and good enough sample to talk about.
Yeah, I think I remember we were involved in something in 2022 perhaps for mid-tier and higher tier, where essentially there's a whole raft of very well qualified advisors out there in England, and making them available to actually go onto farm, have a chat, check what's there, and then confirm with you guys or the RPA before things get ticked off.
Yeah.
So it's not new, it's not reinventing the wheel. There's lots of similarities, so there's a good understanding of the process. It's just slightly different.
We're just trying to make it slicker and better, so you're not waiting for a long time to get that process to happen, and it's as straightforward as it can possibly be whilst doing what it needs to do.
Okay, hedgerow question here. Why are the payments for hedges so low when it's a great habitat and a way of redistributing old BPS back to the small farmer, which, as in my area, are the family farms with small fields and many hedges, payment rates are poor and they're not worth doing. So there's probably two elements to that question, one hedgerow specific and one small farm specific. Yeah,
so we have done a lot of work to try and make sure that the schemes are both sort of workable and accessible for small farms. So for example, I won't forget in a hurry the farmer who's in our pilot, who got me to stand in her 1 acre field, pointing out that the way that SFI was working at that time simply couldn't work in that field, because we required, if you had a hedgerow, we required you to have, I can't remember, I think it was a 6 metre strip next to it, and she was pointing out there wouldn't be a great deal of the field left. So we amended it on that basis, and she was right. And we amended it on that basis to make it more accessible. And we've done lots of other things to make it accessible to small farms, like have the management payment where you get paid £40 a hectare up to the first 50 hectares in your first year, and then £20 a hectare after that, to help small farms cover some of the costs of participating, because we really do want to see small farms able to access this money and access these actions and undertake them. In terms of the payment rates, the way that we work them out is we work out how much it's going to cost you to do this, and what is there any income that you're going to lose by doing it. I don't know whether Jonathan Marsden, whether you want to come in specifically on the hedgerow actions and kind of why they are as they are, but there are a few different hedgerow actions that you can add up together. So if you are prepared to, if you can manage both sides of the hedge, and you're going to have some hedgerow trees in there, for example, then you can start stacking up the payments so they do start to make a bit more sense. And we are seeing good uptake of those. So we think that's going all right, but it depends on your particular farm and sort of what you find useful, really. I don't know, Jonathan, whether you want to add anything on the hedgerow question.
I mean, you've covered it very well, Janet. With 3 actions are available in SFI for hedgerows. There's an annual hedgerow assessment. There's relaxed trimming regime on hedgerows under the managed hedgerows, and that can be trimming every 2nd or 3rd year, or indeed it can be trimming every year, but at a slightly higher level, this incremental cutting, so that we've always got some of the previous season's growth there. And then we've got the hedgerow tree action as well to encourage more trees in hedgerows. Are we going to be able to, is somebody going to be able to recover all of their BPS through the hedgerow actions? I think that's unlikely. There's lots of other actions available in the scheme, whether it's nutrient management planning, low and no input grassland, and et cetera, that we would like people to take up as well as hedgerows. And I suppose the final point of this is, if you have kept your small field pattern, you've got a higher density of hedgerows than perhaps the large corporate entity down the road that's perhaps consolidated fields in the past, then the way the payments work is you will get more money for your hedgerows simply because you have retained more hedgerows in the landscape, and we're very grateful for that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan. Might just be worth noting here as well, in terms of the guidance and working out which options you can put in the same place or alongside each other. Remember from the handbook, it's not called a handbook anymore, but the handbook from the last one, there was a list under every option of all of the other options, both SFI and in that case, countryside stewardship, that you could pair things with. And I believe that the guidance for the new 102 options also includes that. So it enables people to say, okay, I want to do this. What else can I do that fits with my farming system? Okay. Next question is about pasture. So what are we doing to incentivize farmers to keep old pastures rather than ripping them out to put herbal lays in? And that's also a question around payments and potentially the disparity, if there is one, between payments for pastures versus payments for herbal lays. Jonathan, you popped back up, so I think maybe you have something to say on this one as well.
Jonathan will definitely come in on this. And I think this is really important. We've done loads of work on this, haven't we, Jonathan, to try and even out the historic imbalance in the schemes where they were seen very much as serving arable farmers really well and grassland farmers not very well. And on the farming forum, for those who are here from there, this has been a topic of active conversation over years, I know. And what the answer to this is, we've significantly increased the prices for some of the grassland options, and we've made the species rich grassland option now available much more broadly. So if you want to create or restore it, you don't have to go into higher tier. But Jonathan, do you want to come in a bit more detail on this question? Because I know there's going to be lots of people interested in this, aren't there?
So I think a couple of points on herbal lays. First of all, the herbal lay action is targeted at those improved grasslands, that's part of the eligibility, which have traditionally received quite high levels of fertiliser. They're relatively productive grasslands. And what we really want to do with herbal lays is move away from that sort of reliance on ryegrass and ammonium nitrate to one where we've a broader range of species, where we can grow very similar yields, perhaps not the very top yields, but with a fraction of the artificial fertiliser. So the herbal lays are really aimed at that very productive type of grassland and replacing those with the herbal lay. Herbal lays aren't easy to do. They take a lot of effort, a lot of energy, particularly in terms of weed control, re-establishment. They need to be managed carefully to retain the herbs and the legumes. So they're not a straightforward, simple action to do, and that's reflected in the payment rates. It is a very popular action. We mentioned at the beginning of the call, with 200,000 hectares of low no input grassland, with a similar area of herbal lays in the scheme now, which is hugely important in terms of delivering our targets. There are other actions available for improved grassland. We've got the legumes in grassland, which has a lower payment rate, admittedly, and we've also got the low no input grassland. So we'd like to think for all the different grassland types there are, we've got, including the species rich, we've got an offer in place. It's just a question of making sure we get the right action in the right situation.
And I just want to add on this. This is something we're keeping an eye on, because we have heard feedback about the herbal lay action being used in ways that aren't in line with the intention Jonathan's just outlined. And this is the sort of thing where we hear that feedback, we do take a look to see what's going on. And we think the answer is in making sure that the species rich grassland option is appropriately rewarded and appropriately accessible, and therefore you'd be incentivized to use that as well, and all the other grassland actions that Jonathan's also mentioned. But we are keeping an eye on this to see, is there anything we need to do to sort of tweak the different actions and make sure that they're all used in the right way.
And we have already made changes to that herbal lay action compared to what was available last year. So in the information that we published back in May, the specification, if you like, the requirements for that action have got tighter in terms of the number of species, and also there are now limits on the amount of ammonium nitrate or available nitrogen, more specifically, that can be made available through artificial fertilizers.
Brilliant. Thank you. Hopefully that is comprehensive. We've covered a lot of detail, which I appreciate. Good. Next question is, well, again, question of two parts. One is action rather specific. Can we come out of IPM 3 and 4 in SFI 2023 and replace it with AHW10? And also, in relation to that, do we have to wait till our SFI 2023 anniversary to do it, or can we do it now?
Jonathan, do you want to come on this one, on the particular specific actions? I mentioned earlier that if you want to make changes, the change of circumstances process is the one for you. You need to contact RPA and explain what changes you want to make. What we want to do is make that slicker and easier for you to manage online going forward, which is what we'll do over the next year or two as we carry on improving the service. But Jonathan, is there anything on those specific actions that you want to add in or draw?
Yeah, I can understand why this individual may well want to make that change. An alternative to the sort of change of circumstances approach, which may well take time, is both IPM3 and IPM4 are rotational actions, and you can vary the amount of those you do each year. You've always got to deliver at least half of the area of a rotational action. There's no upper limit. So an alternative approach may be to, as rotational actions, reduce the area of those in your existing agreement, and then apply separately for another agreement with the low input serial action. That's an option that's available to you. It will suit some people, it will not suit others.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan.
Great. Thank you. Okay, you've touched again on this before, Janet. Just to clarify in terms of the process and when it's expected, when will full and clear guidance be available for transition between the legacy environmental stewardship schemes and the new CS schemes?
There is some information about this in the scheme information, but I've been asked about this in all three of the webinars that I've done in the last few working days, last night with tenant farmers, today, and also last week with advisors, which is telling us that we don't have clear enough guidance there available with timelines, which I can well understand that you want in terms of when is this new process going to be available that I've mentioned. So I can't, I've given you as much information as I can today about that, but what I am taking from that particular question and some of the other feedback that we're getting about this is that we need to give much clearer, more specific guidelines on what it is you can do and how you can do it and when you can do it. So we will note that action and do something about it as soon as we possibly can, and put some information online and in the guidance about it to make it clearer for everybody. I did mention earlier, if you've got an expiring HLS agreement, RPA will be in touch with you anyway to talk to you about your options as to what you do next. But for everybody else as well, I think we clearly haven't quite got there in terms of giving everybody the information that they need. So I'm hearing that loud and clear, and we'll do something about that.
I know that the RPA have produced some quite useful step-by-step videos in terms of applications where it's a member of staff with the application system on screen and going block to block. Obviously, have to be careful with not using anyone's real data, but that might be an option. Or if in this instance, if it's an advisor doing something on behalf of a farmer, then whether that looks any different as well.
Yes, exactly. And I think what people really want to know is, how can I come out in a slick way? I've said on this call is you can do it now, but it's very bureaucratic and difficult. We're going to have a better way to do it. I haven't told you when that's going to happen. I'm not able to do that today, but I'm clearly hearing that that's something that everybody really wants to know and that we need to tell you. And that's a perfectly reasonable request. And we will do something about that as soon as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you. Right. So again, it looks like it's one from an advisor, but actually it's really useful to have that because often they're representing the experience of a number of farmers rather than an individual. And in this instance, it seems like it's about information changing in terms of signing up for 2023 and adding things in, and now it's a new application. Is that correct?
It is correct. So it's not definitely the advice planning hasn't been wasted, I wouldn't say, because you can still do extra things. You can add more land, you can add more actions. The difference is that you don't have to do it at your 12-month anniversary. You can do it whenever you want. You can do it at your 12-month anniversary if you want, or you can do it at a different time. And you do it now. At the moment, you're going to do it through having an additional agreement. And that gives you some extra flexibility because you can do it when you want, but it does mean that you have multiple agreements, which we know is not ideal for everybody, because actually a lot of people would just like to have one. We're not ready to provide a service automatically that gives you just one agreement that you can change just yet. As I mentioned earlier, the priorities at the moment are getting the expanded offer up and running for everybody, and rolling out the expanded higher tier scheme and getting more people into that, and introducing rolling windows and all of the other features that people like about SFI into that as well. But once we get those two things done, we'll be on to sorting out having a single agreement that you can add to. But you haven't lost out in terms of what you can actually do. You can still do those extra actions. You just need to do them through an additional agreement, and you can do them whenever you want now, rather than having to wait for the anniversary. So there is some benefit there, as well as the disadvantage of having multiple agreements, which is why we decided that that was an all right arrangement in the short term. So you still can do what we said you were going to be able to do in substance. It's just a slightly different process to do it, that's all.
What I take away from both the sessions that you run and also just speaking to colleagues is there's so many moving parts in terms of the various different layers of agreements and how those applications fit together, and then you introduce different land parcels and different options on those land parcels and how they all integrate. So yeah, it's a process of continual improvement and feedback, and appreciate that it would be great if there was a perfect system that could just be delivered on a platter on this particular date. Fortunately, that is not how the complexity of the system works, but ironing out the creases is very much an ongoing process.
Yeah, exactly. This is going to be an ongoing quest to make everything better and better all the time. I think the trajectory is in the right direction on the whole, but I know that there's a huge amount still to do, and it's not perfect yet, so we shan't rest until it's much better and we can do all these things that everybody wants us to be able to do.
Okay, thanks. Oh, this is an unfair question because I know you won't be able to answer it, but I'm going to ask it anyway, I'm afraid. What is the risk to SFI funding in the October budget?
So I think it's important to put some boundaries around this. So I'm not in charge of the government spending review. I wish I was, but I'm not. I'm not sure I do wish I was actually, but I'm not. So I can't, and I'm not able to tell you what the answer is because I don't know yet. So I wish I was able to do that too, but I can't. So we all have to wait till the end of October for that. However, there are some parameters around it already, which are that the government has very clearly stated that it is committed to carrying on rolling out environmental land management schemes, making sure they work for farmers and nature. They've said that they're committed. They've said that food security is national security, and also that they are committed to the environmental statutory targets, and that they want those to be mutually reinforcing, so that we have resilient food production, resilient and healthy farms, and resilient and healthy environment over time. And so that commitment is there, and government have decided, the incoming government, to carry on rolling out SFI whilst waiting for the spend review to happen. So that indicates to you that there is, and other schemes by the way, and so that indicates to you that there is a proper serious commitment there. In terms of exactly what the budget is going to be, we will have to wait and see at the end of October what the answer to that question is, and then ministers will decide within the overall budget for DEFRA how they want to, and within the farming and land management budget, how they want to allocate the funding, and that's something that ministers will make that decision about once the spend review is done. So I think there's some uncertainty around it. Obviously, at the moment, what we're doing is meeting the demand that comes in, and doing that as quickly as we can. So that's what we're going to carry on doing, and then we'll see what comes out of the spend review and what we do next. But we're not in a sort of are we carrying on or not type of scenario at all. We're in sort of exactly what's the size of the budget and exactly how is it going to be apportioned across all these different activities type territory, which is normal territory for government. There is always a process of setting and allocating budgets.
And I hope I'm not overstepping if I say now that the way to encourage a budget to remain sufficient is to evidence that there is an appetite and a need for it. So in terms of actually, if the farming industry wants to evidence that they want a significant amount of money to be available through SFI, the way to evidence that is to apply.
It is, and that's the sort of, I always hesitate to say that because I don't want it to sound like a sort of, oh, use it or lose it, because that's definitely not our attitude at all. We've got to make it relevant and workable and kind of fit on your farm, and something that's attractive for you to do and makes sense for you to do. So we all have a responsibility here. We've got to make a scheme that works for you, and you've got to take part or not. We have seen over the last year record levels of uptake of schemes. So we've got more than 25,000 agreements in SFI now. Even the most popular scheme of all time, entry-level stewardship, didn't have that many applications in its first year. and with SFI, we can clearly demonstrate that it's having impact through the early evaluation that we've done through the pilot and early rollout. Obviously, there's more evaluation to be done over time. So we are seeing really strong levels of interest and uptake, and those people who've got those contracts, it says in the contracts that we can't adjust that contract unless you agree to it. So the best way to secure money, like money from the SFI for your business, is to get into SFI. But that's why the speed of turnaround is so important that we talked about earlier, which is why we're working to increase that as we work through the next few weeks as well.
And yeah, it's good to have the numbers, because the nature of, well, there's two sides of it. The nature of us doing this kind of event is, of course, we would say SFI is really good. People should be making the most of it. Hopefully it works for your business as well as being good for the outcomes, environmental impacts, etc., etc. The questions that we're receiving are where people want to know either something that hasn't been shared yet, or if they're having issues. People don't tend to come to events and put a question in to say, why is this so great? Isn't it brilliant? And I'd like to know why it's this brilliant. So it was useful both in terms of the numbers, but also Tom I mentioned in his beginning that 81% of people are happy. That means that almost 20% would like some improvements, which are obviously being looked at and prioritised. But it does work for lots of people, and the numbers are evidencing that.
Yeah, and it's like, look, I'm the first one to say it's not perfect at all yet. And that 19% we're going to keep chasing down, because we want to get to 100%, obviously, of everyone thinking it's working for them. But that number is higher than it was in the pilot and higher than it was for the 2022 offer. And it's certainly, we're seeing levels of uptake now, which are much more in line with what we'd like to see. And we've got more than half of farmers are in a scheme of one sort or another now. But then that means that there are still nearly half who aren't yet. And we want all those people to have that opportunity. And we're constantly looking to, like, part of what we're doing the events like this for is to help all of you, but also seeing what the questions are gives us an indication of where we need to look next for improving this. So it's all really helpful for us in understanding what to do next. And we are certainly not sitting on our laurels thinking, oh, well, that's that done then. We just think, we've definitely made progress. We've got much more to do.
Good stuff. Oh, and actually the next question ties in very nicely with that, which is some kind but anonymous person has said there's some really useful questions on this forum. Would it be possible for you to answer them all and then circulate Q&A with all attendees? So I haven't seen the total number. It looks like 320 at the moment, and we've got 25 minutes left, so I can't promise that we'll answer them all.
I talk fast, but not that fast.
Absolutely. What we've already agreed with the DEFRA team is that they will review the entire list and group. Essentially, we're going to do our very best, is all I can say. If there are particular topics that we know people are answering on, then the DEFRA team with other colleagues are going to pull together a blog post to address all of those. If it's something that's specific to your own situation or application, as we've said, might not be appropriate to answer it in that format, but in that instance, there is the SFI RPA team who can deal with that, and we would encourage people to make use of that if it's not tackled.
Yeah, so the other thing we'll do is, through these sorts of events, we see what the questions are and we reflect on where is it that our information is not yet giving everybody what they need. So as I was saying earlier, clearly you haven't got what you need yet on what to do if you want to move out of ELS or HLS type arrangements. And we look at this and then we update our guidance periodically to make sure that it's covering everything that we need to cover. So we'll publish answers on our blog, we'll group the questions together and publish the answers there. And we will also be looking to see, is there any updates we can make to our guidance so that you don't have to be looking in lots of different places to get the same information. So yeah, keep the questions coming and we'll do our best. And if you want to ask further questions, you can ask questions through our blog. When you see that post, if you think there's something else you want to know or further clarification, you can ask questions there. And Sarah, who's on the line, diligently looks after all of that and works with colleagues to answer those, or you can go through RPA as well to ask questions specifically to get the answers there.
And for anyone who doesn't know, actually, I sometimes use that when I have a question that comes through the FAS helpline that I think this feels like something that somebody else might have previously asked. So at the bottom of the blog, you scroll down and there's a little comments section, and on there people leave comments or questions, and then the team will respond directly to them, and it's publicly available and really useful. Oh, Sarah, it looked like you were going
briefly appeared then. So we're very proud of our blog, aren't we, Sarah? You're on mute. Do you want to come in briefly?
I just thought I would briefly flash up to prove my existence. But yes, the comments on the farming blog, I think we've posted it a couple of times in the chat, are open. We read all of them. If you include private information like your SBI number, it's unlikely that we'll reply to that publicly. But if you include your email address and give us permission, we can always respond there as well. We're not, as in the know as the RPA is, and they're definitely your first port of call to talk about your specific SFI application and situation, but we'll do our best for general programme things.
Thanks very much, Sarah. It's great.
We've just passed our millionth view of our blog, so we're very proud of Sarah's work.
Congratulations!
Just
Brilliant.
using that as a way to communicate. We try to sort of use the blog in a way that's not really normal in government, but we're trying to show that can be a useful thing. So if you want to keep updated on what we're doing, do subscribe to the blog. We try not to fill it with sort of crap you're not interested in, and just put stuff that's useful. And Sarah does a great job of that. Hence why we've had 1 million views of it so far. So join in and sign up for updates if you want to.
I had to share that link in my closing section, but if somebody who's managing the chat would like to put the subscribe link in.
Yeah, I can see it. It's on the blog. If you go there, you can subscribe, but somebody might paste the how to subscribe thing as well.
Yeah, pretty good. Okay. Right. When will the new options for creating and managing species-rich floodplain meadows be available? Flooding, obviously, quite relevant topic. It's been raining non-stop in Manchester for the last week, but that's pretty standard for Manchester. Sorry, bit of an aside, but Janet, I don't know if you or maybe Jonathan.
Let's bring Jonathan in on this one.
Yeah.
So the actions for the floodplain meadows will sit in both Countryside Stewardship higher tier, and there will also be an endorsed version. So we will be publishing details of those shortly, alongside timescales for applications, etc., etc.
I'd like to invite Andrea to chip in as well, because she's popped in a couple of times, but then we've had our answers from Jonathan. Is there anything you'd like to add, Andrea?
I was just going to say exactly what Jonathan had said, that we have developed the floodplain meadows offer.
Fab. All right, thank you very much. Good stuff. Okay, this is one about the technical intricacies of an application. So land use data is out of date due to no BPS claim updating them. Is it expected that we should change the land use when the SFI application portal flags an issue? And is the land use feature still relevant?
India has got an answer to this one, I believe.
So yeah, land use, we still do require the correct land use to be able to apply for the compatible actions for the expanded offer. So you can update your land use on the rural payment service, and when you're applying for a specific action, if it does flag an issue with the land use, please just check that your land use that you've declared is compatible with the action that you're applying for. You can find the compatible land use code with the compatible actions on the find funding for land or farm tool. So if you go into the action that you want to apply for, it will tell you what land use codes are compatible with that action.
And am I right? I might be misremembering. As one of the videos you've produced a guide to updating land use codes? I think I saw something come out earlier in the year, because hopefully some people had been having a bit of trouble with it.
If we do have one of those videos, I can just check out. If I find the link, I'll pop it in the chat. But we do have a full how to apply video, which would cover make sure you've got the correct land use, but I will find the link and pop it in the chat.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay. Oh, our first woodland question. I'm surprised that we've got an hour and 10 minutes into this without a woodland question, but thank you for whoever put that in. Are there any plans to incorporate small woodlands into SFI? Currently, there is HLS risk falling out of agreements. Have I read that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so. I think it's for people who are doing that in HLS, not having anywhere to go, isn't it? Jonathan, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, we've got in the pipeline quite a comprehensive offer regarding woodlands. At the moment, that it will continue to be available in the higher tier element of the scheme. So as the answer becomes, as we've said before, we'll be publishing details of all of that in the not too distant future.
Can I just keep you on for this next question as well, because it is related, which is when will wood pasture options be available in SFI? Does that sit within higher tier, or is it something that's likely to come out in the future?
The wood pasture actions, there will be higher tier versions, but there will also be endorsed versions available in SFI for the wood pasture.
Good stuff. Okay, thank you. I think the answer to this next question is it depends on the agreement, but I'll ask it anyway. Can the RPA please give an indication of processing times for SFI 2024 agreements, even if that's just on average, on the basis of the however many thousands have been processed so far, what does something that sits in the middle usually look like? Is there anybody who
any RPA colleagues want to come on and answer that question? I explained earlier that it's taking longer at the moment than it did in SFI 23, but we'll be speeding that up. I don't know if anybody in SFI, in RPA wants to come on and say a bit more about that in a bit more detail. India or Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Janet. Hi, and I think you're right what you said earlier, Janet, just about it's difficult to understand exactly now what an average claim will take. I think we'll get that view once we start relaxing those checks and get cases flowing through in a more automated way. So once we kind of get that picture, I think we'll have a more stable view on what the average is. So I suspect what we'll do at the next webinar, Janet, we'll come back and give a sense of what the timings are starting to look like once we get through that process.
Yeah, I mean, it looks to me like the vast majority are being done within 3 to 4 weeks here.
Yeah.
But we were doing it faster than that on SFI 23, and we will get back to doing it faster than that for everybody.
Yeah, that's absolutely the ambition. We get back to kind of SFI 23 parameters, I think. Yeah,
which was less than 2 weeks for everybody and often much quicker. That's what we were doing with SFI 23, and it was often much quicker, but it was within 2 weeks for most people. And yeah, that's where we'll go once we stand those checks down.
Good stuff. And that ties in nicely with if you're coming out of an agreement and you've got a month's period in which you can apply, so you don't have any gaps, then if you've got a couple of weeks of breathing space and then a couple of weeks of application processing time, then that should all line up quite nicely.
Exactly, and by then we will be going much faster than we are now, unless something is not working as it should, then which there's no reason to think it won't be. So we should be turning them around quicker by then.
Okay, good. Next question is not SFI related. Nice simple one, although maybe the answer isn't simple. Will the Countryside Stewardship Capital Grant be available in 2025, presumably alongside the SFI options?
Yes, that's the plan.
Yep. There we go. Nice.
I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that, but yes, there's no plan not to do that. And the capital goes absolutely alongside the kind of revenue payment. So we need to be able to offer both of those. There's no reason to think that won't be the case. Anybody else want to come in on that? Nope.
Yep, nice, straightforward. Okay, as people will hopefully know, as of this year, you could apply for a capital grant at any point during the year. It's a separate standalone application. So I very much encourage people to look at how things stack together to have the most impact. Okay, option or action specific question next. Why has GRH11, which is the cattle grazing supplement, been changed to 5 years? So beyond the 3-year term of the base option. Question about that doesn't seem to work in terms of you can only do it if you've already got that option, but the timelines are different. We got a
Jonathan, do you want to come in on that, or do you want to bring one of your team in on that one?
I can pick that one up, Janet. This is one of the actions that we've folded into SFI from mid-tier. So it's been available for a long time as part of mid-tier agreements. We've made some changes to that action. We've SFI'd it in the speak. We've taken out some of the prescription. We're aware that there are a number of these instances where we've got 5-year actions and supplements. And also there's a slightly larger issue here where people may have got an agreement last year and then we're adding new actions in potentially with supplements as well as part of a new agreement. So the end dates of those don't match up. That won't stop you applying now, and we're going to do some work over the coming months to look at what the options are regarding bringing everything together in an orderly fashion at the end of that period.
Okay, thank you. I wondered when this one would come up as well. Again, Jonathan, it might be one for you if you wouldn't mind just staying on the screen. What will the system be for annual reporting or amendments as rotational options move, particularly where areas vary, where it's allowed in the options?
Yeah, actually, that's not one for me. That
not one. Okay.
RPA, I'm hoping will be able to provide the answer to that one. They've been doing a lot of work in that area.
Yeah. So I think that is the question of how do we report that where our rotational actions have changed, and that is something I don't think we have shared that guidance on, but we will be sharing that very soon. So apologies, can't give a response to that now, but we'll be sharing how to do that for the SFI 23 customers who are coming up to their annual declaration point very soon.
Okay, so it's a watch this space situation. Yes. Thank you. Okay, 1:15, so we should be able to get through a few more. So, next question, also in terms of transferring from one to the other, I'll read it verbatim if I may. Can we end countryside stewardship mid-tier agreements early at the end of the year? For example, mid-tier to be paid for actions done in 2024 without penalty and move over to SFI. And then option specific, new SFI option SPM2 with CLIG3 is okay, but can't claim. Oh goodness, I don't know if we'll be able to answer it specific again. A question in two parts.
It's about basically mixing the two together. It'd be much better for the person if they were in SFI. I think that's basically what we're saying, isn't it? It's about how you stack different actions together.
Yep.
They want to put an SFI action in the field. They've already got something in CS that means they can't do that. So it'd be better if they could just move across to do things. So
I see. Okay.
So we are expecting lots of people to want to do this. We are putting in, as I mentioned earlier, the kind of automated process for you to do that. If you want to do it before that's in place, contact RPA and they'll advise you what to do in your particular case and your particular circumstances. So the rules are that you can do that on your anniversary review agreement, though. So do contact RPA if that's the thing that you want to do.
Okay, good. Next one. Why does grassland have nearly 30% less wildlife options than arable when grass is also delivering greater benefits towards low carbon and net zero? Surely that deserves more financial recognition.
Yeah, we've done, as we were saying earlier, we've done a lot of work on this to try to kind of even out the offer and make sure that there are good, attractive grassland actions in there. And that's partly why we've put this species-rich grassland action into SFI to make it more available. But we also very significantly increased the prices on some of the other grassland actions as well. And we put various other new bits into that offer, and we were discussing that earlier on. I think it's not really about the quantity of different types of actions. Jonathan might want to comment on this. I think there's probably a larger range of different things that you can do on arable land. It doesn't mean to say necessarily that means there's more in the scheme now. I think there is much more in the scheme now for grassland. But having said that, we are always looking for ways to improve it and expand it. So any particular suggestions anyone's got, we're always all ears. But I do encourage you to take a look at this year's offer on grassland. If you've looked at SFI before in 2022 or 23, or you've looked at mid-tier stewardship before, do take a look at the details of the SFI 2024 offer and what you might be able to do on your grassland, because we have done lots of work on this to try and expand the offer, make sure it's attractive and rewarding and gives a fair crack of the whip. Because you're right, grassland farms do have a huge amount to offer in terms of outcomes. And not just on the grassland, but also other features that you may well likely have, like hedgerows and watercourses and ponds and all sorts of things like that. So please do take a look at the expanded offer and the full details of that. And if anybody who's got further suggestions as to things we can do, we're always keen to hear. And we have demonstrated, I think, over the recent years that we have responded to that feedback as we've gone along. And that's always tricky as well. It's worth saying, because I normally get asked this question, why do you keep changing things? And it's because we want to make them better. And everybody wants us to make things better, but everybody also wants us not to change things. And we're always trying to, I understand both of those things. We're always trying to strike a balance to keep on improving the offer, but not make it unstable in a way that's unhelpful. So yeah, tell us if you think there's more we can do, but do take a look in more detail at the specifics of the 24 offer, because we have put much more in there and better prices in there for grassland farmers. So it is a better offer now.
Okay. Side question from me, remembering that when we did our more kind of broad scope webinar back in January, there were also 4 follow-ups where the DEFRA teams were looking at individual farming systems. So there were dedicated ones on grassland, arable, upland, I think, and another. Do you know if that is in the pipeline? And if not, maybe we could work. I'm
sorry, repeat the beginning bit of the question again then, Laura. Sorry.
No, we're rambling.
No, it's not your fault. I lost you a bit.
I'm remembering that when we spoke about this back in January, following our webinar where we talked about everything, there were also 4 more focused webinars talking specifically about SFI on particular farming systems. Wondered if that was in the pipeline or if it's
very happy to do that. Yeah, we're always happy to do things like this. I mean, it's obviously really popular. We get loads of people signing up. We've had well over 1,000 people here today. We always get a lot out of doing this to see what the questions are, and we're always really happy to do this. So if you want to set up more on particular topics, very, very up for that, and always happy to do things in partnership with FAS and Farming Forum. I used to go on the Farming Forum myself, and I just could not keep on top of all the questions and answers. But I find this a really good way to be able to engage and answer the questions that people have got, and I hope others are finding it useful as well. And we're very keen and happy to set up more if you would like.
All right, I will take that away as an action to talk to the DEFRA team about how that might work best for people then.
And the next one I think is an opportunity to bring in, I think it's Charles, is it, from Natural England, to answer the next one if you want to pose it, Laura.
Okay, yes, of course. All right.
About NE, so I'm hoping that our NE colleagues can come and help with this.
Good stuff. Get some extra voices. Okay, so how are you expecting Natural England to go out and survey habitats needing endorsement for GRH6 when it's now autumn and all flowering SPP are dead gone? So this is an endorsement that needs to check that some particular things are happening on farm. Will this mean I'm able to claim GRH6 until the spring or summer when they are able to properly survey the habitat? So first of all, I suppose the question for anyone who's not familiar is which option is GRH6?
Species-rich grassland. I assume is what we're talking about. And there's another one from Vicky, a couple below, which we might cover at the same time, actually, which is NE doesn't have a clue about the process or acceptance criteria for endorsement. So what's going on there then? So I think it might be useful to cover both of those at the same time, mightn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll read that one out as well. And then if there's somebody who's able to pop up and help us with that, that'd be great. So species-rich grasslands, in a podcast back in January, which might have been the audio of our webinar, actually. You said, Janet, that the Natural England endorsement would pop out to review the land. I think you probably did use those phrasings. At the moment, there doesn't seem clarity on that process or acceptance criteria, where previously there was around what was showing on magic maps.
Laura, shall I come in now?
Oh yes, hello Charlie.
Sorry, for some reason my camera isn't working. So yes, the process for these actions is that you will apply them to the RPA, and then the RPA will refer to Natural England. We do have a contract out at the moment to assess these habitats for suitability for the actions rather, as has been covered on this call already. Yeah, the question is a good one. There is an ideal time to assess species-rich grasslands. That's obviously tends to be in the late spring, early summer. But we have, through our contracted advice, got specialists who can identify these grasslands for suitability throughout the year, even in the less ideal times of the year. So we won't be holding or delaying on those approvals.
Good stuff. Okay.
Charles, do you want to cover the thing about what the criteria are? There's a question which is we're not really clear. This person, Vicky, is asking, saying any don't seem to know what the process or acceptance criteria are. Is there anything more you can say about that to offer some clarity around it?
Okay, so obviously there's some detail in there, and I'm assuming for the species-rich grassland action, what our specialist contractors will be doing will be assessing that grassland either so that it either meets the standard, if you like, or the diversity requirements for that action, or that it is likely through correct management to reach that species diversity. So that's kind of the detail, if you like, and that will come down to an assessment on the day. In terms of the process, as I've said already, that is through the application to the RPA for the action as part of the application process, and then that's referred to Natural England, and our contractor specialists will assess the parcel or parcels in question. I think the wider element here, Janet, is that many people on this call will have hire to agreements already, and as you are aware, we do have advisors locally who can discuss the appropriateness of actions. Even if they won't be endorsing them, they can certainly discuss with you the opportunities on the farm for a variety of actions, including these grassland actions, and that also counts for catchment sensitive farming advisors as well, who are able to advise on the range of actions which can address soil, air and water quality.
Brilliant. Can I add one thing to that as well, if I may, which is that one of the questions about why it used to be really clear you could use magic maps and that designation, and the reason we aren't just going with that is because we know that they're not fully accurate and up to date. So we don't want to exclude people who've got grassland that's suitable just because they're not on that map yet. So that's why we're doing this this additional specialist assessment, so that we can capture more of the land that is actually suitable and or has species-rich grassland on it already, by using actual humans who can go and check in a specialist way, so we don't accidentally exclude anybody. Because whenever we use maps like this, whatever the map is, we always find that there's, you know, it's not a hedgerow, it's a cloud, or, you know, it is actually species-rich grassland even though it's not on there, or whatever it is. And so we want to make sure we're being inclusive here, and that's why it's slightly more ambiguous, for the reason that we're trying to include everybody.
Yeah. We don't want a computer says no situation.
No. So whenever you draw a really clear line, and it's another balance we're trying to strike, so we want it to be really clear, but we don't want to draw lines in the interest of making it clear, which then mean that actually it's not workable for people, and that's always what we're trying to balance. So one last one.
One last one, and actually for this one, I think I'm going to ask Rosie to come online, if I may, because it's a question about the pilot SFI scheme that is due to end in December, and when anyone in the pilot can submit an application for the new 2024 scheme.
Hi everyone. When you can apply for the SFI expanded offer on the land in your SFI pilot agreement the day after your SFI pilot agreement expires, the RPA are working as fast as they can to set the agreements live as soon as possible, although this can vary depending on the complexity of your agreement, and more information will be published in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Short and sweet. Thank you very much.
Can I just say a thing about that as well, which is we've been talking internally about the fact that doesn't mean that you have a gap, and we've been talking about what we can do about that, and we do recognise that that's a thing that you're not going to want, and we have been looking at whether there's anything we can do to help with that, and there'll be further communications on that in due course if we can find anything extra that we can do.
Yeah, I know there's a dedicated team within the RPA who are managing communications with the pilot team, because
that's right,
as the front runners in many ways who were keen to get involved and support from the beginning. It would be a shame if then they were in a disadvantage.
Absolutely, we don't want that at all, obviously, because those are the people who took the leap of faith to begin with, coming into SFI, and have really massively helped us shape it. And I think we've found it an incredibly positive experience working with all those farmers, and we absolutely want to respect that and make sure we do what we can for them. So that is the process exactly as Rosie outlined it, but we are aware that's not ideal, and we're having a conversation, I think it was last week, about is there anything we can do about that.
Okay, thank you. And unfortunately that brings us to the end of the session. Becky, could I just ask you to pop the final slides back up for me, please, while I do my closing bit, which is essentially to thank you for your time today and all the questions and great engagement. There would be no point doing these events if you didn't contribute in the way that you do, and it's really valuable. Thank you to Janet, of course, and Tom and the rest of the team working behind the scenes to make this webinar happen and provide all the answers that I do not have in my brain. Yeah, it's really great to work with a team who essentially just want to get the information out to people in as easy a way as possible.
We really do, and thank you very much for having us and for hosting the event and organising it for us. It's brilliant.
My absolute pleasure. So final couple of bits from me. An end of event survey will be going in the chat imminently, and we'd really appreciate, as in the theme of what we've been speaking about today, feedback makes the world go round and makes it go faster or better. So please do let us know if it's been useful and what you might like us to do differently. We'll be sending around a follow-up email very shortly with a link to the recording once that's up online. And we also have our next webinar, which is related and hopefully will be useful to many of you, which is how the new closer partnership between the Farming Advice Service and Catchment Sensitive Farming can support farm businesses around getting the information you need about SFI, the other grant schemes, and all the good stuff that CSF already do across the country. So I will put the link to registration in the chat now. That is booked in for the 21st of October in the afternoon, and hopefully some of you can join us there. You'll see our information up on the screen there, so you can visit the Farming Advice Service website at farmingadviceservice.org.uk. And one of the good things that we get really positive feedback on is our monthly newsletter and the key dates email, which is a kind of one-stop shop for all of the useful content that we get from the various partners, DEFRA, RPA, we work with NFU, CLA, lots of really helpful and expert people feed into those. So please do sign up to receive them. There's also the webinar recordings, podcasts, technical articles, and various other FAS resources on our website. As we've already mentioned, it's also good to get the DEFRA blog updates, and you can sign up to receive those into your inbox as well. Usually the fresh new news comes out through the DEFRA blog first and then trickles down through other resources. So if you want to get the heads up right at the beginning of when it's available, then that's a really good source. And with that, I will close the event. Thank you very much again for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lorna. Thanks, everyone.